Yeah, she said that she's having some issues with the microphone. She's fixing it.
Okay, but she's here, right?
Yeah, she said that she's logged in.
Okay, 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 cool. Um, so I think we can begin then.
Okay, there is an issue. She says she can't hear anything.
Mm,
I think she needs to
yeah,
log out and log back in. She
yeah,
says
I
she
think
can't
that
hear
would help.
anything. Such are the vagaries of online work. We have all faced this, so we're all good.
Okay, Shashwat ma'am, I think you are back. Am I audible at this point? Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, also the screen is visible, right? Dr. Banerjee, Dr. Mukherjee, both of you.
Yeah, for me it's all right. I've been having no issues.
Okay, okay, thank you. And all the participants, I guess everything's fine as well. So, right. Uh, Priyanka, could you just remove your timer for a second? Yeah, sorry. So, good evening, all of you. Uh, on behalf of the Presidency University Debating Society, I'd like to welcome you all to the Freshers Debate 2021. For the first time, our Freshers Debate has been a more inclusive and a much more diverse event. We opened up the Freshers Debate into three categories: Bengali, Hindi, and English. Today, we will be having the English finals, and the Freshers Debate has been part of a long standing tradition of the President's University Debating Society. And we believe that the Freshers Debate is important in empowering the voice of newcomers into the university, as our college and our university and this very platform has always stood for. And with that, I would like to introduce our judges for the day. Firstly, we have Dr. Purna Banerjee from the Department of English, and we have Dr. Shashwati Mukherjee from the Department of Economics. Dr. Shashwati Mukherjee also happens to be the teacher in charge of Presidency University Debating Society. And we would like to welcome both of you all. And we're honored to have you at this very prestigious event.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, yes. From
And
my
all the
side
best.
too.
All the best for the event. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mrs. So, with that, I'd like to do a short briefing of the entire debate. I would encourage all participants and the judges to take note of what I'm about to say. So, each speaker has a time period of 4 minutes to give their speech, right? After those 4 minutes, they will have to, and these 4 minutes, they will be giving their speech either for or against. You will be marked on three parameters: logic, delivery, and argumentation or articulation. After these 4 minutes are over, you will be asked a question. Now, who will ask these questions? It will be your fellow speakers. The speakers don't have to be from a specific side or a specific bench. That is, if a speaker is speaking for the motion, it can be a speaker who has also spoken for the motion or is going to speak for the motion. They can also ask this question, ask them a question, right? The question has to be pertinent to the speech that they're giving. The question will be accepted via the chat, and it will be accepted by the moderator, that is me. Uh, on that note, we would encourage observers who are here to not use the chat box. please do not type things like I cannot hear or this is not audible or I cannot see the screen, because at this point we need the chat box for the point of informations that are going to be asked. However, if the judges are unable to hear or unable to see, they're most welcome to unmute or use the chat box. Secondly, on this after they're asked this question, the speaker will now have 1 minute to give their rebuttal. They will have to answer the question that has been asked to them. And on that very question, the judges will mark them on rebuttal. Now, if a question is asked to a speaker and the speaker does not answer the thing at all, like the speaker stays silent throughout the 1 minute, then the speaker automatically gets 0 points out of 10. Secondly, if the speakers are not asked a question at all, as in if none of the speakers have a question, then the judges are expected to ask a question to the speaker. If the judges also do not have a question, in that very unlikely situation, then the speaker automatically gets 10 points in rebuttal. So considering all this, logic, delivery, argumentation, and rebuttal, on all these parameters, you will be marked. So the total points, maximum points that you can get is 40. On that very note, we would like to begin. The motion for the day is this House believes post-colonial countries should prioritize pre-colonial history and notions of indigeneity over themes of anti-colonial resistance when fabricating the material culture of national identity, that is anthems, street names, holidays, flags, etc. With that, we would like to call upon the first speaker for the day. Speaking for the motion, we have Priyadarshini. Here. Priyanka, could you switch on the timer?
Okay, I'd like to start in 3, 2, 1. For years, Kolkata's Bishop Lefroy Road was known as the street on which legendary filmmaker Satyajit Ray lived and worked. It was enough to distinguish the residents on the 150-meter stretch. Some time back, West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee announced that Lee Road near Bishop Lefroy Road would be renamed Satyajit Ray Dharani as tribute to the maestro. However good her intentions may have been, it certainly did not go down well with most of the citizens of the city, especially filmmaker Sandeep Ray, the son of Satyajit Ray, who currently resides in that street. He was also one of the first people to raise objections about the same. Good evening, esteemed judges, the timekeeper, my worthy opponents, and members of the audience. My name is Priyadarshini Roy, and today I stand in front of you presenting my views for the motion. Lately, we have been seeing an increasing trend among post-colonial countries who take their anti-colonial resistance to an extreme level while fabricating the material culture of national identity. Yet another example would be Shahid Minar in Kolkata, which was formerly known as the Ochterlony Monument, which was erected in memory of a British commanding officer. However, this was renamed in 1969 as Shahid Minar in memory of the martyrs of the Indian independence movement. Instead of renaming a British-era structure to honor freedom fighters, why couldn't the government build a separate monument in their honor? Also, the very language that we are communicating in today is a remnant of our colonial past. As much as we love our native regional tongues, we also know that we cannot do away with English altogether. In a country like India, where there are at least 22 recognized languages, the efforts by some of the regional governments to rename basic things like signboards of shops and other signboards of buses and railway terminals in regional languages can cause a lot of problems. People from different regions of India itself, or even foreigners and tourists, might find it difficult to understand or comprehend. Chandanagar has a French influence, since it was a French colony, while Goa has Portuguese influence. We should incorporate these elements instead of doing away with them, as they add to the diversity of the nation. Thus, I'd like to conclude by saying that pride in one's culture and identity is important, but one cannot do away by disregarding one's past. Countries which have had a colonial past have colonialism in their history, and that is a fact that no one can deny. Evidences of their colonial past is present everywhere in the form of colonial buildings, their architecture, materials used, the names of the streets, be it Elgin Road or Dalhousie, as also other aspects of day-to-day life. All these things are as relevant to other post-colonial countries like Australia and countries in the continent of Africa, and so on. It is important to encourage ethnically diverse groups and help them develop their culture, but it can also be done by embracing one's colonial past. It adds to the variety. A country can move forward by encouraging their very own ethnic diversities, but one cannot move forward by disregarding one's history. It is very much a part of our lives, whether we like it or not. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that speech, Priyadarshini. We will now be accepting questions. I see one question. Udita, you may ask your question. Sorry.
Hello, Priyadarshini. Nice speech. So when you are talking about the fact that national identity should include colonial history, so what about the centuries worth more of history, indigenous history, that is extinguished when this is done?
Udita, could you please repeat the last part of your question? It was not very clear.
So when you're talking about inclusion of colonial history in national identity, what about the centuries worth of pre-colonial indigenous history that gets extinguished due to this? I hope I was clear now.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Udita. I'm not saying that we can disregard the indigenous history as well. Like, we keep both of them, be it indigenous or be it the colonial ones. So, like, all of them are parts of our history. So we can't neglect or ignore any of them. These things add to the variety. So these things should stay. And these things are a part of our history and culture. So we can't ignore them. They are very much a part of the entire history of India or any place as such. Hope that answers your question. Thank you, Udita.
Right. Thank you for your rebuttal, Priyadarshini. With that, we will move on to the second speaker of the debate. We have Shrishti speaking against the motion. Here.
Yes, I'm present. Should I start?
Yeah, sure.
A very good evening to everyone present. My name is Shrishti Banerjee, and I will be speaking against the motion. So when I read the motion, the first thing that comes to my mind is a quote by Chinua Achebe, the African author, which is, "Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter." Through the ages, countries have been colonized by superior powers, be it the Spanish, who made it a point to pulverize indigenous civilizations when they colonized them, to in the more recent times, the British or French, who made it a point that history only talks about their glories. Historians, through the ages, only talk about the colonizers. If I take the history of India as a reference, we have been colonized through the ages by the Aryans, Mughals, and in the more recent times, the British. If we now consider the pre-Aryan era in India, we do not have any proper documentation of the indigenous people. And you know why? That is because the history then was written by the colonizers, which were the Aryans. Why do you think a flourishing civilization like that of the Incas has that little historical documentation of their civilizations? Because their colonizers, the Spanish, made it a point that they were completely obliterated. I will also take the case of Lachit Borphukan, the Ahom king, now Assam, who took the advantage of the navy in the Brahmaputra River to fight against the then Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. Though Aurangzeb was much more powerful than Lachit Borphukan, he completely won the battle with the help of the navy. But this was never recorded in the Mughal books because the colonizer, the king Aurangzeb, had completely lost against a small kingdom like Aha. Therefore, it has no documentation in the Mughal history books. Similarly, if we do not create a national identity around the anti-colonial narrative, then generations down the line will not remember our national heroes or how the country was exploited. If we do not have streets named after after national heroes like Rishi Aurobindo or Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose or Bhagat Singh, future generations will ultimately forget about them and their enormous contribution in helping us attain freedom. Thereby, I strongly believe in themes of anti-colonial resistance should be prioritized over notions of indigeneity, because if history does not remember it, then no one will. Thank you.
Shrishti, you still have a little more than 30 seconds left. Are you sure you want to complete your speech?
Yes, I will.
Okay, sure. So we will now be accepting questions on Shrishti's speech. Udita, okay. Is there anyone else in case? Fine, we'll just go with Udita. Udita, you may ask your question.
Very nice speech, Shrishti. When you mentioned about the fact that documentation of indigenous history is destroyed by colonizers, so why during formation of national identity is it not better to go and reclaim our identity and not let the history of colonization like shadow the pre-colonial history?
Yes. Thank you for your question. Actually, if you don't mind, can you just repeat it? The last part of your question, it actually got a bit cut, like your voice.
Yeah, I
sorry
too
for
would
it.
like to. I am one of the judges. I too would like the question repeated, please.
Yes.
I wasn't sure about the clarity.
So, Srishti, when you were talking about the bad effect of our history and documents being destroyed by colonizers, so why is it national identity for the history of pre-colonialism to come and stop its destruction?
Is your last part of the question that the like pre-colonial history, how is it stopping from destruction of national identity? Is that your question?
Shrishti, no cross questioning.
I'm
You
so
can
sorry.
ask for a clarification, and like Udita can repeat the question. Udita, if you're asking the question, be a little more concise and be a little more clear. I think that would help.
Perhaps she can write the question in the chat box so we too
Yeah.
can, because
Yeah.
I understand the beginning of it, but both the times she lost me in this second part.
Yeah, I think there's
Yes.
something wrong with her mic. Udita, if you could quickly write down your question in the chat. That would really help.
Yeah. Yes, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Right. Udita has provided her question. Shrishti, when you're ready. Shrishti?
Yes, thank you very much for the question, Udita. I will be answering it now. So I'll start in 3, 2, 1 now. So your question is that why during national identity formation is it not better to reclaim pre-colonial history and stop the destruction it has been facing during the colonization? Now, this pre-colonial history that you are mentioning or I've been talking about have actually been written down and recorded by colonizers then. Like I said, this history that we are talking about, say, before the British, have been written down by, say, the Mughals, or even before the Mughals by the Aryans. So what about those people who have been actually fighting against the colonizers? That history has not really been recorded as well as that of the colonizers. That is what I was trying to say, that history only takes the side of the colonizers. So therefore, if we do not actually record the post-anti-colonial history or the anti-colonial resistance, or name streets or like have a nationalistic identity over the anti-colonial resistance, then in the future time it will follow the same fate as that of, say, the indigenous people in times of the Aryans, or the people who were against the Mughal emperor, or the people who were against British. So that is to answer.
Shrishti, please wrap up now.
I have answered for this. Sorry.
Yeah, good. Thank you for your rebuttal, Shrishti. With that, we'll move on to the next speaker. Speaking for the motion, we have Udita Bhattacharya. Here.
I will be starting in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Udita, just a second. Priyanka, could you reset? Yeah. Really sorry, Udita. Really sorry. Please continue.
I'll be starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A very good evening to all my judges and dear audience. Today I, Udita Bhattacharya, will be speaking for the motion, that is, I will be saying why post-colonial countries should prioritize pre-colonial history and notions of indigeneity over themes of anti-colonial resistance when fabricating national identity. Right. Now, what is colonialism? Colonialism is foreigners settling and exploiting a country economically. It is not really some rulers coming in and setting up their kingdom here. But in the process of colonization, colonizers impose their religion, language, economics, and other cultural practices on indigenous people. The imperialistic culture serves to systematically extinguish indigeneity by directly destroying people's culture or enforcing a belief that it is inferior, right? So states, in a sense, in these post-colonial are because they have emerged from colonial empires. They inherited the colonial institutions that were in place, right? So, for example, many people of the initial army of Iraq were from people who had served in the British army, right? Now, what happens in this process is the anti-colonial resistance in these countries, to begin with, were being led by leaders who received the privilege of colonial rule, be it wealth, education, or status. right? So paired with this, when we go for a system where institutions of colonial rule are upheld by the formation of national identity, what it does is the ideology of colonization lingers in the identity of people and institutions of political, economic, and social pressure. Now, the anti-resistance against colonialism was a revolution to overthrow the colonizers. It was not necessarily a celebration or reclamation of our own culture that existed before the pre-colonial, in the pre-colonial era, right? Now, if we uphold the indigeneity of the people of the region colonized, it would do away with the need to fabricate, that is, manufacture or invent a new national identity that is based on the very ideals colonizers introduced. Choosing to do otherwise furthers ideals of divide and rule, because identity is now separated on the basis of what the colonial leaders taught us, and hence different regions form segregated national identity, increasing conflict. Now, what instead of institutionalization and normalization of colonial identity, what we should do is replace this national identity formation by including our culture, language, ways of life that the colonial leaders had sought to destroy, that the colonial leaders had trying to destroy by maybe destroying the documents, putting forward their own ideals to be superior. So while doing this, we go for a sense of pride in the people that increases their relation to one another. They now relate to each other, and in ways they know that this country is theirs. The entire ideals of like superiority and inferiority that colonization often imposes. For example, how we see the fixation of post-colonial countries who went for a national identity formation with colonial ideals, have with fair skin, English accents, an entire hierarchy of civil servants and political representatives being treated on a holy pedestal, is now being systematically deinstitutionalized, because we no longer believe in these ideals. The states are trying to break free from it. So yes, they resisted now, but now when they are forming their state, they are not going for adapting the institutions and the ideals and the systems the colonial system provided, but instead going for a reclamation and reinstitutionalization of how they have been leading their lives for centuries before colonization started.
Right. Thank you for your speech, Udita. We have one question from Arsh. Arsh, you may ask your question.
Hi, Udita, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm on.
Good. So my question is, don't you think prioritizing the fight against colonizers is a better way of upholding national identity than simply relying on pre-colonial, tales?
Yes, so very glad to take. So it was like prioritizing, should we prioritize like resistance or rather pre-colonial? Okay, right. So starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah. So notice that the fight against the colonial leaders was a revolution, right? But when a national identity is being formed, a revolution is not giving its system. The nation and its identity has anthems, flags, political institutions, economic policies, and the entire way people perceive each other, right? And now these are not taught and or changed by a revolution. What revolution does is drive the colonial leaders away. So now that they are driven away, when we go for national identity formation based on colonial ideals, we are instead again reinstitutionalizing these entire ideals that we fought to do away with in the first place. So when we go and set up in our parliament in a building built by the British, we are in a sense putting forth our entire foundation of a nation and national identity into a structure that stood and symbolized the pinnacle of British control, that is Delhi and the entire British Empire over India, right? Yeah, my time is done.
Yeah, noted, Udita. Thank you for your speech. We'd like to move on to the next speaker, which is Arsh Das, speaking against the motion. Arsh, the floor is yours.
Hi, am I audible, everyone?
Yes, you are.
Cool. I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, everyone. This is Arsh, and I'll be speaking against the motion. Now, I'd like to start my speech by asking you to imagine a situation. You wake up on the 15th of August, and no one is celebrating as much as they used to. Now, take it up another notch. Imagine the wars of independence fought by India, the USA, and the countless revolutions across Europe, such as Poland or even Ukraine. And you discredit all that history by just ignoring that they happened in the first place. This is the stance that the opposition is trying to come and sell you. Now, it isn't as simple as trying to say that it happened, but it must be shown through actions, through song, through special occasions, as the motion suggests. Take an example. You wouldn't have the father of the nation on the Indian currency if that were the case. If he did nothing for the country, right? Now, when the proposition comes here and says that you want to promote notions of indigeneity, what you are essentially saying is that everything that is ours or originated inland be put on a pedestal, and that everything that come from beyond our borders should essentially stay there and not wander into our vicinity at all. Now, why shouldn't these people from elsewhere be given a place in our country? Let's take the American flag, for example. The 13 stripes and the 50 stars on the American flag that represent the original 13 British colonies, and the 50 states would, like, if you took away all the states that came about by achieving revolution, you would only have the 13 stripes on the flag. How would you account for the loss of the history, of the rich history of these 50 states? You would have completely ignored the struggle of independence and the lives lost in the process. Now, if you prioritize the Native Americans, who are in all 1.6% of the population in America, you leave the rest of the country feeling alienated by propagating Native American history and the population that exists right now. Now, holidays commemorating significant people and events are central to the anti-colonial resistance, and they are being completely ignored by doing that. And our side of the house chooses to acknowledge everything that happened and place it on the same level as the history of the pre-colonial times. Now, you need to realize that we live in a vastly expanding and rapidly expanding era where being cosmopolitan is the norm. In this situation, when we fixate on being narrow-minded and trying to revive an era that existed centuries ago and is proclaimed to be folklore by people who are elder than you, we discard everything that happened during the struggle and all the changes that took place. Following colonialism, you have a great amount of diversity present in the colonies that forms the backbone of the picture that you see in our country or in any other country that became free from colonizers at any point. Take, for instance, the national anthem, the Independence Day, or even the Republic Day. This struggle will give you a stronger sense of identity than anything ever will. Now, in summary, anti-colonial resistance is a massive chunk of history that you cannot discredit. You cannot account for the hundreds of years of struggle by just wiping it out and prioritizing kings of olden times. In a narrow-minded approach, you take away all the power that and all the lives that were lost fighting for independence and for a free identity, and you wouldn't have the world as we know it today. And that is the side that our side of the house proposes. Thank you so much, and I'm proud to pose.
Thank you for that speech, Harsh. We will now be looking for questions. Anyone except Udita? Right. Kritika, you may ask a question to Harsh.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are audible, Kritika. You may ask your question.
Am I audible?
Yes, Kritika, you are.
Yeah,
Okay,
you
okay,
are.
okay.
You are.
Yeah. So in your paradigm, you said that we should prioritize anti-colonial resistance. So, when we are talking about these movements in your examples, you have to take into account that many sections of the society were excluded from these movements. They were actually even oppressed by the residents of the colonized nation itself. So, how do you account for the sense of belonging of these minorities, of these ignored groups in present day when they are not, when they are still present? And so, how do you account for this gap?
Okay, I'll start in three, two, one. Now, the debate is between colonial history and pre-colonial history, right? Colonizers did not come in and say that. Let's take an example. Colonizers did not come in and say that Dalits were inferior than the rest of the folk castes, right? That existed beforehand. So what we are essentially dealing with is an indigenous problem and an external problem, right? The external problem cannot be like, when you talk about the Indian fight for independence, you cannot discriminate on the basis of, let's say, caste, that these people faced oppression and so they did not fight, and that a certain other caste fought and they should be given more credit. That is not the way it works. Everybody is given equal importance in that paradigm, and that is why I think that we need to focus on colonizers, essentially, like how the native people drove away the colonizers and in turn created a stronger sense of identity in the process.
Right. Thank you for your rebuttal, Arsh. With that, we will now be going for the last pair of the debate. With that being said, I'd like to call upon Kritika Ghosh speaking for the motion. Kritika, the floor is yours.
Yes, I will be starting in 3, 2, 1. Greetings to the panel and everyone else present here. Today, I, Kritika Ghosh, will be speaking for the motion. Now, I'd like to start with a simple quote. Nothing vast ever enters the life of mortals without a curse, and colonialism was not an exception. But it was more than a curse. It was a cultural disaster in all of the cases, which destroyed indigenous cultures, took over the lives of people, their education, their religion, and so on. Yes, it's true that the colonial empires did not just simply give up and decided to leave one fine morning. Anti imperial, anti colonial movements, years and years of struggle, resistance against the oppressors amongst the colonized people brought about independence. And identity, a word that will be thrown around a lot today, is it played a major role in these anti-colonial movements. And these identities were quite unconsciously anti-colonial, right? Because the people thought of themselves as nothing but against the colonial order. And in many ways, this is logical. When one doesn't have a legit idea about the country's future, its state of affairs, one associates it to the struggle. But today we're talking about national identity post-colonialism. After these anti-colonial movements, they come into power. They should do so in an authentic indigenous identity. They should do so with an authentic indigenous identity, which had been so far oppressed by the colonial power. What should be inevitable is a continuous shedding of this old skin of colonialism and the emergence of new self awareness, critique, and celebration. It is like a process of lost and found. And what should be found here is the roots. What should be prioritized are the notions of pre-colonial history and the identity of the natives. Now, in our paradigm, we are not doing away with the idea of glorifying these anti-colonial movements and the struggles of the people, because obviously independence as it is today was brought because of these very struggles. But what we are believing today is the prioritization of the pre-colonial history and the notions of indigeneity over these themes of anti-colonial resistance. Because especially because today we are debating about fabricating material culture like anthems, flags, etc., street names, which are obvious tangible representations of national identity. So why will we not want the true depiction of our original culture, of our actual history to be brought at the forefront? Because these symbols of our nation, these material culture symbols, will remain as sort of like a permanent uniform that post-colonial countries will have to wear in an international arena. Importance of thus prioritizing these native ideas and notions of pre-colonial colonial history is of utmost importance, because even in intra-country, because people have to feel empowered, hopeful, optimistic, and all good things about the future, which has little to no resemblance to the culture that colonialists had put down their throats. It is a new beginning for many countries. It's like why will we attach our image, our symbols that these residents of the country to anti-imperial, anti-colonial resistance and yes, and many post-colonial countries also run a risk of future oppressions, of future colonization. So your symbols, your national identity can't be tied or related to anti-colonial resistance. These symbols should portray independence, self-sufficiency, strength, power, and I would like to rest my case with that.
Right. Thank you for your speech, Kritika. We'll now be accepting questions. Anyone except Udita and Arsh? Right, we'll just go with Arsh. Arsh, you ask a question.
Right, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right. So, Kritika, according to your speech, are you saying that all the freedom fighters and the lives that were lost and all the um, material elements of nationalism that were created thereon, do they not hold place in our original history?
Yeah, so in today's debate, I'm not questioning whether they hold a place in our history or not. What we are debating today is their importance, is the prioritization of these notions when they're forming these material national entities, which are very tangible and like which are very materialistic in nature, like anthems and street names. And these and if we prioritize pre-colonial history in this manner, we are not neglecting the struggle and all the work that has gone into making colonial countries independent today. But what I am putting forward is a greater weightage over these anti-colonial resistance towards pre-colonial native ideas, so that the people of the country which are inhabiting today, they feel a stronger sense of belonging. They feel an identity that is not just simply attached to those very struggles, but of so much more, so that the future generations too can relate to these ideas.
Thank you for your rebuttal, Kritika. With that, we'd now like to call upon Shrija Datta to close the debate, speaking against the motion.
Can I just get 5 seconds?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'll be beginning in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, everyone. This is Srija Datta, and I'll be speaking against the motion. I would like to reiterate the motion. The House believes that post-colonial countries should prioritize the pre-colonial history and notions of indigeneity over themes of anti-colonial resistance when fabricating the pre-colonial history, but the focus was less on themes of anti-colonial resistance, which was supposed to be focused in this debate. Now, imagine what are the themes of anti-colonial resistance? The equality in a country, fraternity, liberty, and justice, and so on and so forth. Now, when forming the constitution, if we go back to the pre-colonial history and notions of our past, notions of indigeneity in the past, we can see that most of the past of any of any colonial or colonized country was actually dominated by monarchy. So in that case, why should we follow that history rather than we can change it and bring about something which will provide more equality to people, which is far more important than focusing on other aspects, glorifying something which was oppressive inherently, then giving it the name of indigeneity. And then the opposition brought about points like the anti-colonial resistance often excluded the minorities. Now they have to keep in mind that even the pre-colonial history and so-called idea of indigeneity in the past also excluded a major chunk of the society. The very fact that the society was divided into Varnas and the Shudras did not even have a say shows that there was a major chunk of the society being rejected. Rather, when the anti-colonial movement started, the oppression was faced by everyone, be it the higher caste or the lower caste, and that is the reason everybody came forward, and it brought about a more united front, which actually helped the country to develop the sense of unity. Then colonialism changes a country in a significant way. There are lots of norms that get changed, lots of new faiths come into being, like there are lots of new beliefs which come. Now, it's important that not all of these beliefs that come after colonialism is wrong. Like taking the example of India, the practice of sati was banned, which was again indigenous in culture. Now, obviously, if we uphold that pre-colonial history and uphold the pre-colonialism, like the notions of indigeneity in the past, and promote sati, that is obviously not good. So that is the reason when the country changes significantly, it is important that we take into consideration the new themes that or the new progressions that come into being and focus on those, and therefore bring about a change in the society and build the society in a new way, because it has been affected massively by colonialism, and therefore it needs to be changed, and we cannot necessarily go back to those times which have certain norms obsolete now. Then there are colonialism sees the rise of many new sections of the society who actually come up with a voice, like the middle class, which we saw in Indian independence. Then a new intelligentsia comes into being, and then there are new people who take up the stand or who fight for colonialism. Now, if we focus on the pre-colonial history and forget these people, it will not be right, because these people are the ones who have freed us from the clutches of colonialism, and forgetting their contribution to this would be disrespecting them, and therefore we need to have we need to prioritize these people and therefore support the prioritize themes of anti-colonial resistance over the pre-colonial history and notions of indigeneity, because yeah, sure, because those are based sometimes on something which is not really tangible and a fantasy, but the themes of anti-colonial resistance are more tangible and they make more sense and relate to the reality more. Thank you so much. With that, I rest my case.
Thank you for your speech, Srija. We will now be looking for the last question of the day. I don't see any questions. Okay, Kritika, you may ask a question.
Shrija, in your speech, you mentioned that to incorporate while building our national identity symbols, progressions that the society is making in terms of sati. You mentioned like today it's not there, so to incorporate these advancements in terms of these progresses in national identity. But how do you not doing that when you're attaching the idea to resistance movement, which in terms of timeline is the same as the practice of sati? How do you not incorporating these progressions in your paradigm?
Sorry, Kritika, but could you repeat your question? Your voice dropped in the middle and I couldn't hear you.
Oh, my bad. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Okay, so in your speech, I'll try to make it quick. You mentioned that while building our national identity symbols today, we should incorporate the progress that we have made so far as a society. We have to incorporate these advancements in terms of sati. You mentioned all these progressions we have to incorporate in these symbols. So, how in your paradigm, in your side of the house, how do you plan on doing that when you're also kind of fixating the national identity to something that happened decades ago?
Yeah, exactly. That's the point, right? Like the pre-colonial, it was a practice which used to happen in the pre-colonial times, and in the colonial times, it was rejected. And the anti-colonial resistance, apart from sati, also anti-colonial resistance were the themes that we're talking about were mainly equality, fraternity, justice, and all. So these things were not present in the pre-colonial history because, as I mentioned in my speech, there were divisions in the society inherently present back then. So these themes have to be upholded, which came about when anti-colonial movements started. And when these themes are highlighted, we can bring about progression in the society. I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Thank you for the question, by the way.
Thank you for your answer, Shrija. With that, we come to the end of the Freshers Finals in the English category. I would like to thank all the speakers for their insightful speeches and their enthralling points. With that, we will now be taking some time off to calculate the scores. Just a request to Dr. Mukherjee. Ma'am, are you here?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Ma'am, if you could update the Google Sheet, then we could get to the results quicker.
Fine, I'll do that. I'll do that right now. Yes.
Okay,
right.
Thank you, ma'am. With that, I would request our judges to give their 2 cents on the topic. Dr. Banerjee, if you could give us your opinions.
First and foremost, my congratulations to all the freshers who participated in this debate. All of you spoke really well. You spoke from the heart. There was logic and arguments. You know, your teachers, that is, bemoan the fact that our students often don't know what an argument is, but you sort of lay waste to that part of our arguments. So the future of presidency is in very good hands. As a presidentian myself, I'm very proud to hear freshmen speak so well and in such articulate and well thought out ways. Having said that, I was very much part of the Presidency Debate Society. In fact, I won many debates for presidency as a student, which was like when Methuselah walked the earth, I'm sure, for you guys. But this particular motion really pissed me off when I saw it. And I'm not against the organizers. This is what it is meant to be, right? Because when I look at an argument which sort of irks me, which it sort raises my hackles, that means that the argument is working. So this particular motion was quite challenging and quite irritating for me, because and that's why, and I do understand, a lot of you that spoke, some of you came before the others. The final speaker has an advantage, having heard the other speakers speak. I understand all of that, but having said that, this particular motion, I wanted to rip it apart. I wanted you guys to deconstruct it. The presumption in the motion, the sort of inherent presumption in the motion is all things pre-colonial is indigenous, as if that all things pre-colonial, we can go back to a point of origin when there was a pure, say, any nation, India, America, anything. And that presumption in itself plays into right-wing politics. And if you know anything about me, I'm anything but a right-winger. So it plays into this idea of purity of race, purity of nation. We can go back to, and Sridhar did point out quite a bit about that. He did take that as a challenge, that what existed in the pre-colonial times was not necessarily or inherently better than what existed during the colonial times and in post-colonial resistance. I do get the perspective of the students that argued that post-colonial resistance too was a product of colonial times. Some of the people leading post-colonial resistance inherited colonial legacies, were very much part of that elite culture. The Bengal Renaissance was very much part of the elite colonial sort of structure. So they inherited the privileges of colonialism and could speak and hence resist. In a way, they were replicating post-colonialism. In a lot of ways, mirrors and replicates colonialism. I understand that part too. So I wanted someone to tell me, and very honestly, that it is not an either or. It should never be an either or. Colonial or pre-colonial or post-colonial should never be an either or. We are a sum of all our histories. We are a sum of all our experiences. And in every age, we have seen people discriminated against, people sort of whose voices have been squashed and delegitimized. And so the identity of a nation perhaps it needs to recognize not only the majoritarian voice at every age, but also the minority voices of all times. And that is all I'm going to say. Thank you. Guys?
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
You went like all silent.
No, ma'am. Thank you so much for your insights and your opinions, ma'am. Oh, ma'am, really sorry.
Full force, yeah. Asha, one request is that I think I can't edit the file. Is it like editable? I can only view it.
Ma'am, I think you are as an editor on. I'll just check just a second.
Yeah, I can only see the view only. That's why I can't edit it.
Ma'am, you are added as an editor.
Just a moment.
Also, Dr. Banerjee, it's really nice to hear you that you were also part of the society. It was not in our knowledge. It's really great to have an alumni come back and give us her opinions on that very platform.
Yeah, there was no freshers debate at that point. At least I don't remember. But I was very much part. I remember simply being asked on that very day by my seniors that there was a debate in Calcutta University. I was part of the debate society. It was debating society. And I was told, oh, aajke ekta debate hocche. You should walk into Calcutta University. And I was dragged by my seniors. And that was my initiation. So I won that debate and then continued in my 3 years of presidency being part of the debating society. So yeah, it is nice to be back. I was a judge, I think, not last year. Of course, last year with the pandemic, you didn't have a debate, I think, but the year before. So I've been a judge for you guys for a while now, but yeah, this has been home to me as well.
Yes, ma'am, it's an honor to have you here on this platform.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. Dr. Mukherjee, if you could also give us your opinions on the debate.
Yeah, first of all, yes, the topic itself is quite challenging. That's as Poonadi pointed out. And given that, right after Bengal election, with so much of, health crisis, social sector problems, lots of in the past few years with anti-national, national slogans, with Bengali, suddenly the urge to have a Bengali feel, all these things are and right at this thing, you people come up with this motion. It's definitely is quite irritating. But as I should mention that on such a motion, speaking for is often a very difficult job, and I think many of you who actually spoke in favor of the motion, spoke really, really well. I mean, definitely, as some of you, I think Srishti or Udita pointed out that it's not just a colonial thing, but even prior to that, when we had the indigenous culture, there were marginalized people who are always oppressed. They were always overlooked. So it was always there. There are the people who were always neglected. So it's not like when you highlight the colonial thing or something, it's a national culture which is lost. Definitely it is lost. But you see, is it all bad? I'm just asking, is it all bad? I mean, if you just lose that colonial feel, we have to break down our prize Victoria memorial. Or if you go back to the Mughal era, we are the so-called, they are also the so-called outsiders, we probably have to break down one of the wonders of the world, the Taj Mahal. So I don't know if it's, definitely they bring with them the culture. They taught us English. Come on, you can't forget that. This is a debate in English, and they taught us.